Hello, I'm Nan McKay, and I would like to introduce you today to Nichol Beckstrand. Nicole is the owner and founder of YardHomesMN, which stands for Minnesota. As a lifelong banker, she understands the challenges with financing affordable housing. Her entire banking career, she also focused her work in the affordable housing space by creating financing tools for the single family market mortgage area and worked with new markets tax credit programs to create more affordable rental opportunities. So, welcome, Nichol Beckstrand.
Hi, I'm delighted to be here.
You seem to have had three phases of your life: mortgage banking and Minnesota Multifamily Housing Association, and now your interest in researching modular housing and other technologies to lower the cost of housing. So let's take each one of those separately. What were your primary interests and passions in the banking industry?
Yeah. My resume is eclectic, is what I call it. And some of the consulting work I do is eclectic because of the skill sets that I've had. But I'm a finance person. Graduated with a degree in accounting and went into banking, and banking was very much a passion. And as I grew in my banking career, I also developed a secondary passion, which was for housing. And at the time, it was just for stable housing in general. And I think that it comes from my youth and feeling that I had a great home and felt that everybody should be able to have access to home. And home is a heavy word that comes with a lot of stigma in some cases. And so I began volunteering for all sorts of nonprofit organizations that were connected to housing and home. And obviously Habitat for Humanity was one of them, but also then volunteering and getting on boards of other housing organizations that were intermediaries in the distribution of capital to create affordable housing, like the Family Housing Fund in Minnesota. And through that process, I learned a lot about what the bank could do more of to help in this process. And so at the bank, when I was there, we started a mortgage department, but we also expanded it to ensure that it could address Hispanic lending. So we basically made mortgage loans based upon ITINs. And then we put those individuals on a path to convert those loans into traditional financing once they got their social security number and got their citizenship. So it was a big part of it. And even just the mortgage department in general was really focused on low to moderate income communities as well. So, creating housing at a price point, or creating access to housing at a price point that was below the market. So, and then we had some other commercial tools that we used, low-income housing tax credits to finance multi-housing organizations, and the New Markets Tax Program as well, to finance multi-housing. And all of those programs are very robust programs that are able to deliver big units of housing. The challenge with them is, like any government program, they take a very long time to get to market. And so you're dealing with a lot of attorneys and lawyers and accountants, and there's a lot of hands in the pot trying to figure things out and make sure things are complying with the requirements of the government program. So it's going to take you a couple of years from the idea of, and once you purchase the land, it's going to take you a couple of years to actually get the units installed. And we need housing now. In Minnesota, our prior governor, put together a task force on housing back in 2018. And I believe in 2019, they delivered their final report that showed that in Minnesota, we would be 330,000 units short of housing over the next 10 years. And that's a significant amount of housing shortfall. So as I branched into my work within the Multi-Housing Association, I spent a great deal of time working with innovation and really thinking about how can we do this better and faster. And so modular was a big part of my work and my discovery there. And that actually is what kind of led to the idea of yard homes. I learned through that discovery process that manufactured housing is a much faster way to create units and essentially create more, tighter units that are more energy efficient and can be delivered much quicker to the marketplace.
So tell us a little bit about the New Markets Tax Credit Program.
Yeah, so that's one of the government programs that individual CDEs or CDFIs, we were CDFI, would apply to the government. And it's a program that gets funded some years and in some years it doesn't, but it's a pretty long process of the funding round. And if you do get the tax credits, then you've got to identify the projects that you're going to use those tax credits on. And you've got investors that are coming in and putting in cash and capital to the project to buy the tax credits and essentially offset the tax liabilities that they have to the government. So there's a lot of structure that needs to happen to put those in place. In a New Markets tax credit transaction, you also have to have a certain percentage of commercial within the housing. So housing alone does not qualify, but if you build in commercial, so it'll typically have to be a multi-housing type of property that will have commercial on the first floor. And in order to make the formulas work for the tax credits, the expense related to the building, most of it needs to go into that commercial space so that you can allocate the tax credits to the housing piece of it. So it's a fairly complex program. When one does get completed, you get a big chunk of housing all at once, which is great. It's great that the program has been funded for the last couple of years, year over year. It is a program that has bipartisan interest. So we're lucky in that both the Republicans and the Democrats in office tend to want to support this program. So it has sustained multiple president's changes over the years, and it is a great program, but comes with a lot of a big heavy lift to get it to market.
The tax credit program is great from the point of view that it's the only program that we have for affordable housing today that is new construction, where we've got new units going up. The only problem, of course, as you well know, is that it doesn't really reach the low-income people unless you marry it with some other subsidy. And I think what we're hoping is that we can eventually get more and more put into the additional subsidy programs that need to be there with the tax credit. Aren't you finding the same thing?
Yeah, and I think that's really why we created Yard Homes, right? I mean, I think we were, my partner Jamie Stopelstead and I were very excited about just the concept of tiny living and the ability to create these units in a manufacturing environment and to be able to create, a good manufacturer can build out, 2 units a day, right? From start to finish, fully complete with all the appliances and wrapped and ready to go. That's quite an efficient process. And now obviously there's other steps in the process to getting that unit installed in the ground so that somebody can live in it. You still have to get the license with the city, you still have to get the ground ready, but it's definitely not 18 to 24 months like a typical multi-housing property project.
Let's talk about that a little bit more because people may not know what you're saying. Let's go back a little bit and talk about what are accessory units. Let's talk about tiny homes. Let's talk about all that so people kind of put it in a context.
Yeah, so accessory dwelling units are basically small homes that can be placed on a property, and they're typically placed slab on grade. And you can see different types of them. There will be attached ADUs, which basically would just appear as an addition to a house. There are detached ADUs, and then there are also garage units, ADUs, where people will put the ADU on top of an existing structure, an existing garage. So they are, full-fledged homes, right? They comply with FHA requirements in some instances. And so they are not trailer homes. They actually are full-fledged homes that get installed on the ground. Tiny homes, they're referred to often, but tiny homes are actually homes that are on wheels and are movable. So that's kind of the difference between the language. ADUs are meant to be permanent. Now, ADUs are small, so essentially you could, move an ADU from one person's property to another if you needed to, but essentially they're built to be installed and to be maintained as permanent long-term residents. So
what is really the difference between the ADU or the accessory units on existing lots? What's the difference between that and just building a home on a lot?
Well, a couple of different things. And that's a good question you ask, because some of the states like California, they have ADU laws that allow them to build ADUs up to 1,200 square feet. And I say, well, in Minnesota, that's just a small house. That's no different. Typically with an ADU, there is already a home on the property. And so you're adding another unit to that property. You're not dividing that property and creating a separate parcel for that property. And you're typically tapping into the existing housing utilities for that property. So that's kind of what defines it separately as an ADU. We're seeing in some counties and cities where the tool of an ADU, I would call it, are being used to come into vacant properties and create cluster developments. So bringing 6 ADUs together to create a cluster of housing. And in that instance, the ADU policies of the city are typically set aside, and the cluster development policies are utilized, and the ADU is just the housing module that is being used. So it gets a little gray sometimes.
So zoning is a big issue, right?
Yep, zoning is a big issue. Making sure that the city that you are in has an ADU policy, and as well making sure that their existing building policies don't conflict with the ADU policy. So we'll see that sometimes where a city will craft a beautiful ADU policy, but then they've got some standard building policies that kind of get in the way. So you've got to work through those processes to make sure that you can clear the way for ADUs to be successful in that arena. And the other challenge really with ADUs is the financing of them. For market rate people wanting to put an ADU in their backyard, they typically can tap into their existing equity of their home to establish the ADU. They can also probably get an unsecured loan if they've got the financial statement to support that, to put an ADU in place. But there's not a lot of ADU programs. We set out with a plan that we wanted to bring ADUs to Minnesota as an affordable housing program. And so we developed what we call our YHelp program, which is it's our nonprofit partnership program. And so how that program runs is Yard Homes ourselves. We actually buy the ADU and we own the ADU. And we partner with 2 different nonprofits. One nonprofit on the left of us is a nonprofit that has access to land that they want to maintain affordable. So that land may be vacant, but it also may be a piece of land that already has an existing family on it, and there's just more space there for an ADU to go. onto. And then on the other side of us, we are looking for a nonprofit partner that has individuals with vouchers. And so we own the ADU. We sign a lease with the landholder, the nonprofit, to place our ADU onto their property. And then we sign a master lease with the other nonprofit that has voucher tenants. And then we place a voucher tenant in that program. Our program lasts for 10 years. And over the course of that 10-year period, Jamie and I maintain that property and ensure that it is up to code. And at the end of the 10-year period, the ADU actually title transfers from the ADU from us to the landowner. So it may be the nonprofit, but it also may be the family that's living on that land, maybe purchasing their home on a contract for deed from the nonprofit. And so our goal is to create that housing affordability for that 10-year period. Once the landowner or the nonprofit owns it, they can do what they want with it. Our desire is that they will keep it long-term affordable. And even in the model, if there needs to be some cash flow to the nonprofit or to the family, we can do a revenue share of the voucher money that's coming in. So it's what we love about the program. We've selected a certain number of nonprofits here that we're working with in Minnesota that have land. We've also selected a certain number of nonprofits that have access to individuals, one of them being our Veterans Association, MACV. And what we love about this program is that we're giving them a very beautiful ADU placed in a community, in the backyard of a family, and really understanding and hopefully documenting over time the success of veterans in this type of housing. Typically, when we've got homeless vets and we give them access to housing, we're putting them in sky rises that have been typically NOAA sky rises that have been built in the 70s or the 80s. They're not these brand new multi-housing complexes that have workout facilities or community space. So there's a lot of alienation that happens within veterans, and there's a lot of failure in that group from a housing standpoint. So we really want to see how we can make these individuals successful by surrounding them with a community, putting them in a beautiful unit where they have direct sunlight, beautiful windows, direct access to the outdoors, on a bus line or on a light rail line, so they can get to where they need to be, and really see some improvement in their life.
So when you're talking about vouchers, you're talking primarily about VASH?
The MACV program does use VASH, although our program could work with Section 8 vouchers. It could work with youth vouchers, basically any voucher that's available, it could work with.
Only project-based?
Project-based vouchers would work well, yep.
Okay, well, great. Thank you so much for that information. I think there's a lot of people that may want to maybe look at what's happening with their housing authority or perhaps their local nonprofit. Maybe there's some ways that they can work in various cities, and maybe contacting you to find out how to do it.
Yeah, the program that we've established is definitely exportable to different cities. It's exportable to different states. You really just need to have two nonprofits, one with land and one with people, and you can bring it together.
All right. Well, thank you so much, Nicole.
Thank you. This was a pleasure.